The Lost Empire, the fall of Alexandria. There is a fire that has never stopped burning, not in stone, not in flame, but in memory. For over 2,000 years, the world has mourned a library it never saw. But the truth of Alexandria is stranger and far more tragic than the myth of a single blaze. This is not the story of one fire. It is the story of an empire of knowledge, built, guarded, and slowly, deliberately erased. Most people know one fact about Alexandria, that its great library burned. Few know that it burned not once, but many times, over centuries, by accident, by war, by neglect, and by intention. Fewer still know that the destruction of Alexandria was not the death of an idea. It was the death of an empire that never needed an army to rule. To understand what was lost, we have to understand what Alexandria was. In 331 BCE, Alexander the Great stood on a strip of land between the Mediterranean Sea and Lake Mareotis in Egypt and ordered a city built in his name. He would not live to see it rise, but the city he founded would outlive every empire that tried to claim it, Greek, Roman, Christian, and beyond. Alexandria became the meeting point of 3 continents, and for a time, the single greatest concentration of human knowledge the world had ever assembled. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy seized Egypt and founded a dynasty, but Ptolemy understood something his rivals did not. Power built on swords decays, power built on knowledge endures, so he built a different kind of empire, one with no borders, only a building, the Great Library of Alexandria. The library was not simply a building full of scrolls. It was a research institution, a university, and an intelligence operation, all at once. Ships docking in Alexandria's harbor were searched, not for weapons, but for books. Any scroll found aboard was confiscated, copied by royal scribes, and the copy returned to the owner while the original stayed in the library's vaults. The Ptolemies didn't just collect knowledge, they hunted it. At its height, the library is estimated to have held somewhere between 200,000 and 700,000 scrolls, an almost incomprehensible figure for the ancient world. Scholars from Athens, Babylon, Persia, and India came to study, debate, and write. Euclid formalized geometry within its halls. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth with stunning accuracy, using nothing but shadows and geometry. Herophilus dissected the human body and mapped the nervous system. Centuries before, such study would be considered acceptable again. This was not a museum of the past. It was the cutting edge of human thought. But empires of knowledge are fragile in a way that empires of stone are not. A kingdom can lose a battle and recover. A library can lose a single afternoon and lose everything. The first wound came in 48 BCE, almost by accident. Julius Caesar, besieged in Alexandria during a civil war, ordered the enemy fleet in the harbor, set ablaze to deny it to his opponents. The fire spread from the docks into the city. Ancient sources disagree on exactly how much of the library burned that day. Some say warehouses near the harbor, holding scrolls awaiting export. Others suggest greater damage. What is certain is that the library survived in some form, but the fire was a warning the world chose not to heed. For the next several centuries, the library limped onward, rebuilt, diminished, relocated, in part to the Serapeum, a sister institution housing an overflow collection. Knowledge that had once been centralized became scattered, fragile, dependent on the goodwill of whichever ruler held Alexandria that decade. That goodwill ran out in 391 CE. The Roman Empire had become a Christian empire, and Emperor Theodosius issued a decree banning pagan worship throughout Roman lands. In Alexandria, this decree became a death sentence for the Serapeum, by then home to the library's last great collection. A mob, incited by the city's archbishop, stormed the temple complex. The statues were smashed. The scrolls were destroyed or scattered. What centuries of scholars had gathered, a single afternoon of religious fury unmade. Decades later, the philosopher Hypatia, mathematician, astronomer, and the last great mind publicly associated with Alexandria's intellectual tradition, was murdered by a mob in the city's streets, dragged from her chariot and killed for the crime of representing a kind of knowledge the new order no longer tolerated. With her death, the era the library had built effectively ended, even if scattered scholarship limped on in fragments for years after. This is the part of the story most documentaries skip, because it complicates the myth. There was no single villain, no one army, one fire, one ruler responsible. Alexandria's empire of knowledge died the way most empires die, slowly, through neglect, war, changing priorities, and the simple fact that maintaining a library is harder than burning one. Funding dried up under later Ptolemies, more interested in court intrigue than scholarship. Roman administrators saw the library as a curiosity, not a priority. And finally, a new religious order saw its remaining contents as a threat rather than a treasure. So, what exactly was lost? We will never fully know. And that is the most haunting part of this story. We know names of works that vanished entirely. Complete histories, lost plays of Sophocles and Euripides beyond the handful that survived, scientific treatises referenced by later writers but never recovered. We know Eratosthenes wrote on geography in works now lost to us almost completely. We know there were astronomical observations spanning centuries, medical texts describing surgical techniques not rediscovered until the modern era. The library did not just hold copies of existing knowledge. For many works, it held the only copies. And yet, something did survive. Not the building, not the scrolls, but the idea. The notion that knowledge from every civilization could be gathered, translated, and studied together, that scholarship deserved patronage, that questions about the natural world deserved systematic investigation. These ideas didn't vanish with the library. They echoed forward into the House of Wisdom in Baghdad centuries later, into the monasteries of medieval Europe that preserved fragments of Greek learning through Arabic translations, into the Renaissance scholars who would later rediscover piece by piece what Alexandria had once held whole. The lost empire of Alexandria teaches a harder lesson than the simple tragedy of a fire. It teaches that civilizations can build extraordinary things and still fail to protect them, that knowledge, unlike conquest, has to be defended every single generation, or it simply disappears. Alexandria didn't fall to a foreign invader. It fell to time, to indifference, and finally, to a fear of what it represented. Today, nothing remains of the original library. Its exact location is debated by archaeologists. A modern library, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, now stands near the ancient site, built not as a replica, but as a promise. that what was lost once should never be allowed to vanish again.